we skipped a little bit, but if you remember what the Sikh is talking about, the Rebbe said that the Torah is divided into 7 books, according to some opinions, which that's very problematic because it comes out that the 6th book starts off with a bad thing, that the people were complaining. We just finished learning about that in the Chumash. So the Rebbe said that's exactly the point of the Torah. The point of the Torah is to come down into the world and to have an effect on even the lowest things. That's what we just finished learning also in Likkutei Torah. Even to these people who were mitonanim, it says they were the Erev Rav, they made only trouble, they were only looking for trouble. Even to these people, the Torah was given and the Torah has an effect. And that's the whole idea of the Dira B'Tachtonim. But this can only come if we are flames that go up on their own. It says that's what it means, Ba'alotcha, that Aaron lit the lamps, lit the menorah, and until the flames had to go up on their own. And the Rebbe explained that flame means something that goes out. But it has to also go up. You also always keep improving more and more. But it has to be on your own. It has to come from your inside. You have to realize the truth of godliness, the truth of the Torah, the truth. It has to be something that comes from your soul. That you're not doing it for another reason. It has to be automatic. And when that happens, like people should be automatically honest. People should be automatically kind. It should be an automatic thing in people. Because that's what good is. The same thing is with the Torah. It should be automatic. But unlike being kind or being honest or whatever, that's a nice thing for you. It makes the world a good place. But by the Jewish people doing what it says in the Torah and being so ingrained with this good that it's automatic, by means of this, it makes the whole entire world automatically holy. The whole world elevates. And so the Rebbe said we can okay. Similarly, it's also the whole, what we're going to read next week is about the spies. You know, the story, terrible story about the Meraglim. We'll read about it in the Shabbat and the Mincha. It says, what's the Meraglim? That Moses said, okay, let's go into the land of Israel. And the Jewish people said, listen, maybe we should, scout out the land a little bit to know what it's like. So we'll go in prepared, we can make a plan. So what's a good idea? So we sent in the top people from each tribe. And they came back and they said, okay, we came back, we've been there for 40 days and we've got a report. What's the report? We can't go in. Can't go into the land of Israel. It's too hard. Let's stay in the desert. So Moses said, oh, come on, really? I mean, this is what God promised. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, this is the whole reason he took us out of Egypt, to have the Torah to go into the land of Israel. And they said, yeah, well, not that we're not going to go in. We're just not going to go in now. We'll wait a little while to go in. And Moses said, but God wants you to go in now. He said, we didn't hear God say anything like that, We didn't, you heard, so you go in. We're not. So they refused to go into the land of Israel. The Jews refused. And the Rebbe explains why in other places, but nevertheless, now we can explain this whole thing about the Meraglim. Those were the scouts, right? The scouts that Moses sent in to scout out the land. Surveyors. Back then we can ask a question. How can it be that the Torah tells us such a terrible story about these spies that they did such a bad thing in the time that the Torah doesn't even speak about, when it comes to talk about an impure animal, it doesn't say the impure animals. It tries to avoid negative speech as much as possible. When it talks about these are the animals that are not pure, it doesn't say that are impure or that they're right, that they're defiled or something. Tameim doesn't say tameim. It says Einu Torah. Also, the Haftorah, which is supposed to be something like the Parsha, talks about the next week's Haftorah. Talks about when Yehoshua sent in spies to spy out the land of Egypt, spy out the land of Israel, as they did a really good job. They spied out the land of Israel, and it enabled the Jews to enter the land of it. This is exactly the opposite of what the spies did in our parsha. It says that the Haftorah, the portion that we read after the reading of the Torah, we read usually from the prophets or from the writings. Here it talks about a story that's exactly the opposite of the spies, right? We're saying next week is talking about the spies. So the Haftorah talks about exactly the opposite. Maybe we can say that the point is like this: the whole intention of the Torah, the reason the Torah talks about this terrible sin of the scouts, is in order to reveal the highness which is in it from what the spies did, what the scouts did. Because by means of this, and that's what was revealed in the Haftorah, that by means of sending these spies, by means of Yehoshua, we can say that this, he learned from Moses. Yehoshua didn't leave the tent from Moses. He learned Torah all the time. He was like the moon receiving from the sun. Moses was the sun, and Yehoshua was like the moon. They were inseparable. So Yehoshua did the job that Moses began. Moses sent in spies, and it didn't succeed. Yehoshua knew that he had to send in spies that would succeed to take over the land of Israel. Like it says, the Yeshua was one of the spies that Moses sent in. He and Caleb were the only ones that did what Moses said. He said the land is very good. And even more, the intention of the other spies that they sent was really for the good. At that time, they were all kosher when Moshe sent them in. That's why he sent them in, because they were all big tzaddikim. They were so high. That's why, according to some opinions, it says that these spies that Moses sent in and they failed, that they haven't got a place in the world to come because they're higher than the world to come. Because their intention was so good. Okay, the Rebbe explains what was their intention, that the Jews should stay in the desert and learn the Torah. And because if they came into the land of Israel, then they would be disturbed. They wouldn't be able to be so holy anymore. So their intentions were really good. Okay. In this, we see the whole idea that we're talking about here in our Torah portion, the Shalahevet, that that the flame goes up on its own. By means that Yehoshua learned from Moshe how to send scouts properly, and also the thing of sending the spies that Moses did, God said, if you want to, you can send them in. In other words, it came from Moses. This is like the thing of automatically. It came from Moses to send in these spies. So therefore, Yehoshua did the same thing on his own. He sent spies, and they did what he was supposed to do. And only by means of this, Joshua was able to come into the land of Israel with all of the good qualities that were in there. There was big miracles. It says that the Jordan River split and everything. That's what it means that Joshua, he was like the moon. The moon receives from the sun. But after that, right, first of all, it receives just like the lamps received from Aaron. But after that, Joshua became independent. Joshua became independent. He also, right, sent the spies in on his own. That's going to be what it says in the future, that the moon is going to shine like the sun. So that's the whole idea of this week's Torah portion. It comes out in the middle of the month of Sivan, the 15th of Sivan. when the moon is full. The month of Sivan, that's the whole idea of the light of the moon. The Jewish people are compared to the moon. And it says that in the future, the moon is going to be new like the sun. In other words, what does it mean? The same thing as the lamps in the temple had to be lit by our own, but afterwards they went up on their own. The same thing as Joshua, he received from Moses. He was like the moon that received from the sun, but afterwards he was inspired on his own. The same thing, all the Jewish people, they're all going to be inspired on their own. It's going to come from the inside of each and every one of us. There's a beautiful sikh of the Rebbe about Chanukah, and it says that there's a law on Chanukah that you put the Chanukah lights outside. It says, why do you put the Chanukah lights outside? And there's a mimer, he asks all sorts of questions and answers, but finally what it says is that the Holy Temple shined up the world. It spread out light into the whole entire world, the Holy Temple. And therefore, the candles, the lamps were in the temple, and they shined out the world. But the whole idea of Chanukah, there's 8 lights. It shows on the future. It says the Moshiach, that's above nature. 7 is like nature. Mashiach is going to be above nature to the point where the Beit HaMikdash won't shine up the world. The world will shine itself. That's what the Rebbe is trying to point out also here, that the world, first of all, it has to come from us, that we ourselves become so inspired by the oneness of God. Listen, that's how the Tanya starts off. Tei tzaddik, be a tzaddik. Every Jew takes this, or the Jewish soul is given the oath to be a tzaddik. A tzaddik is a person that he feels the truth. He feels God all the time. He feels that he's being created. He feels he's being created for a purpose. Every single Jew feels like King David felt, right? Empowered, dynamic, only wanting to do good, constantly. So to the point, King David didn't used to even sleep. He used to sleep just like 10 minutes a night or something. So let's just go over here. Let's go a little bit further. Even though this is very nice what the Rebbe says over here. But let's just go to, oh, you know what, let's do it. Come, let's do it. Come on, we have time. All right, now, I don't know if you know it, but in the Polish Hasidim, other Hasidim, Chabad doesn't do it, but on the 20th day of Sivan is a fast day. It's a terrible day. It was the day that Khmelnytsky, may his name be blotted out forever, killed tens of thousands of Jews. Some people say hundreds of thousands. So we're going to learn about this. Let's look. So that's the whole idea of the month of Sivan. In the middle of the month, it says that the moon is full. From the 15th day of the month, that's the middle. From the 15th comes the 16th. What is 16th? Is 4 times 4. 4 times 4. Then after that comes the 17th of Sivan. That's 17 is the gematria good. Tov. Then there comes the 18th. That's Chai, being alive. Then until the Shabbat, then the Shabbat was the 19th of Sivan. Our Shabbat is going to be the 18th. And because from it afterwards we come, next week will be what's called the 20th day of Sivan, that has a special quality of doing tshuva and tzaddikim together. That there's a fast, that some people fast on the 20th day of Sivan. This is going to be the service we're going to see. A flame goes up on its own in a good way. It says in the Magen Avram. Magen Avram is one of the main commentators on the first book of the Shulchan Aruch, which is called Orach Chaim. He brings over there, the Magen Avram, he brings that it is accustomed to fast on the 20th day of Sivan in all of the area of Poland. That's where these big, Poland, Ukraine. Nevertheless, our rabbis, the rabbis in Chabad, they didn't do so. They didn't fast. Not even the previous Rebbe, when he was in Poland. He was in Poland for 10 years. And there were many people that did fast, right, in Poland. Maybe we can say that the reason is, and like I said, that the reason for this fast is because there were tremendous, terrible slaughtering that the non-Jews slaughtered Jews on that day. So we can say that this is it's called the Tach V'Tad. Why doesn't Chabad fast? All the other Hasidim, they do fast. Why? It says it's not to say that our rabbis were missing something and that they didn't want to do this fast of this day. A fast is a day of repentance, and this says no. They saw on this day that it was a very, very high and a holy day. So high and holy that on a holy and a happy day, you're not allowed to fast. Like it says, you're not allowed to fast on Purim. Purim. Even though the Purim is a day of forgiveness, it says that Purim is higher than Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim is just like Purim. Yom Kippurim brings a fast, is fasting, and it brings forgiveness. Purim is higher. It brings forgiveness without fasting. And therefore the Chabad doesn't fast on this day, especially what's known, the great highness of the number 20 is the gematria of Esrim. The word Esrim is the gematria of Keter. The word Etrim is Keter. Yeah. The yesh, right? If you add up the word Esrim, you add it up, it comes out to be 620. That's the word Esrim. The yesh, that we can say that this is like the idea of tshuva. About tshuva is better than tzaddikim. That it says the Mashiach will come and bring the tzaddikim to do tshuva. So that's the whole idea. This day is a terrible day, but on the other hand, it contains in it the idea of tshuva, that it can be transformed to good. That's the whole idea of the Hasidim in Poland. It's known that when the first Jews came to Poland, they said Poland, what does it mean? Poland is Polin. It was very, very good for the Jews in Poland. There were millions of Hasidim in Poland until Hitler came along, and the Polish people joyously helped him. And he killed most of the people that were killed in the Holocaust. The Jews that were killed in the Holocaust came from Poland. And the thing that was very unique about the Jews being killed in Poland was that Hitler killed them. It had absolutely nothing to do with conquering the country. They didn't put up any resistance, and they weren't, if he would have taken the country over, so they would have, and the Jews were concerned with doing Torah and learning the commandments and etc. And they had nothing. So it was with all the countries that he went into. Killing the Jews had nothing to do with conquering the country. Nothing whatsoever. He could have just, made them work or something like that, or just left them alone. No, he had to. So it said Poland was very, very good for the Jews. It was very, very good. There were millions of Hasidim, they flourished there. Nevertheless, the Hasidim used to say, Poland is Polin. Here, we're only staying overnight. It's not a place for a Jew to live. Shekan Yelunu Bizman U'Makom Golos. Here, we'll only stay in the time of exile. Ze'atam, this is the real reason why that nation, they called their country Poland, even though they had no idea why. That Poland is a non-Jewish name. They didn't know what they were saying, but really that was the content. We could say Lina means what usually it means, just for staying for one night. The whole entire idea of the exile is just a night. There were, by the way, people that came to the Rebbe, and there were the people that wanted to give a lot of money to make Chabad houses in Poland, and the Rebbe refused. He said, there was, Mr. Chase. He was a very wealthy man, and he said he was willing to support. He loved Chabad, he loved the Rebbe, he wanted to support. And the Rebbe said, I know I'm saying things that you don't want to hear, but Poland is not a place to make Chabad houses. They have synagogues over there. There's something like Chabad houses over there in Warsaw. I was there. I spoke there. I played music there. But nevertheless, it's not really a Chabad house. There's businessmen that come there in Poland to do business, Jewish businessmen. So that provides for them a place. That's what the Rebbe said. Hainu, that it means, Polian means that the whole entire exile is just like a night. It's just like staying over one night. B'zamana galut. But afterwards, all the Jews will leave and come to the true place where Jews are supposed to be in Israel. In other words, the whole entire world is just like Poland. It's just a temporary dwelling. The real place for a Jew is supposed to be in the land of Israel. When is that going to happen? Only in the Mashiach is going to bring all the Jews to Israel. Not only the Mashiach is going to do a bigger miracle. He's going to bring the Israelis back to Israel. All the Israelis, the left. Exactly the opposite of what Mashiach is supposed to be. But here's on the other hand, this is going to be a way of lean. We are going to stay there. Even though that we're found in exile, nevertheless, that God will help us and he'll make a pleasant, a productive staying in Poland in this whole entire time of Golos. It says that in the time of exile, the Hasidic Poland, they really flourished. Torah and commandments really flourished over there. There was tremendous levels of holiness. And they elevated the whole entire country. Just something like how the Jews elevated the land of Israel. The opposite of how the non-Jews elevate. The influence that the non-Jews had to the Jews, how they stole from them, raped them, and killed them. From this, we have a hint also in the service of man, that a person has to learn from everything that he sees and he hears. A Jew has to know that the exile that we're in is just darkness and it's night. Doesn't make any difference how much Torah you learn, how much mitzvahs you do. We are in the middle of a deep, deep, dark night. And we're only just staying here temporarily. This is not the real situation of a Jew. We're not supposed to be this way. And together with this, we have to know that we have to utilize this Polin, we have to utilize this nighttime as much as possible so that the flame should go up on its own. Here we should add on holiness and good. Until by a Jew, it makes that the whole reason that there is such a thing as night, it says God didn't create the night except for learning Torah. We'll use this time that we're in, the nighttime, when you rest, we're not going to rest. We're going to learn the Torah, we're going to do the commandments, and spreading out the idea of Kolo Gam Pashtus, even in Poland, that we're going to spread out and we're going to benefit even the time of the exile. It's a very interesting thing. I think if you look through history, and I'm not a historian, and maybe you can bring all sorts of contradictions to this, but every country that the Jewish people were in, it succeeded. And when the Jewish people were exiled, the country fell. And one of the best examples is Spain. Spain was like leading the whole world in almost everything. And as soon as they evicted the Jews, it took them a few years and they became like nothing. Became like absolutely nothing. And there were other places that were very similar, right, to the same pashtus. L'safek b'makom shedorosh rav umore. There, you should go to places where there's no one teaching Torah and you have to teach, even though it's a dark place and etc. You have to settle as though you're going to stay there forever. Make the place a godly place, a holy place, a place of Torah. From all of this, even though it's going to be only temporary, from all of this, we can make a special emphasis on our last generations, which our generation is the generation of the heels of the Mashiach. Especially our generation, which this generation is the last generation of exile. And we see all that's happening in the world with this whole big corona bluff and the war of Israel where almost nobody got hurt and how the whole world is turning against us. This is turning things upside down. There's never been before in the history of the world. The whole world is affected. Even though that it says that this is the lowest generation, Achshir Dora, this generation come Mashiach. And especially it says that we're in the heels of the Mashiach. What does it mean, the heels? That a heel has no sensitivity whatsoever. This is the world. This world has this generation is like the lowest of all the generations from before it. But nevertheless, we receive all of the power from the Torah and mitzvahs that were done in all the generations from before, because a good thing is eternal. Until it says that that's what lights, our lamps, that this generation can come from all of the service of all the generations, the self-sacrifice of all the generations of Jews that came before that. Now we have the power that our lights can go up on their own. Exactly the opposite. Because there were the heels and the lowest level, the last generation of the exile, we have our power to be autonomous, that we can be inspired on our own, to elevate all of the generations before. Like we said before, if you want to lift up a building, so how do you do it? You put the jack underneath the foundation, lift the whole thing up. By means of this, the last generation of exile, we become automatically the first generation of the redemption that will elevate all of the generations previous to us. Elevate all of them to the point there'll be the raising of the dead. And especially that the shepherd, Aaron, the Cohen of our generation, was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe is speaking, of course, about himself. He said that the Rebbe said about himself that he's just an extension of the previous Rebbe. We'll see clearly, as we saw clearly, his love for every single Jew, including what it said about Aaron, that he loved Jews, that all you can say about them is that God created them. They have no good qualities whatsoever. And we saw that the previous Rebbe did this by his tremendous efforts and success in spreading out Torah and Judaism to the lowest places, people that had no connection. And especially what says that in our generation, they're not people like they were in the first generations, because now every single Jew has some sort of a relevance to the Torah in some way. In the previous generations, there were people like Yerovam ben Nevat, and these people that they knew the Torah, and they were tremendous geniuses, and they opposed King David. Right now, the people that opposed the Rebbe, they were dunces. They were people that they were basically they didn't know anything except maybe half of a Gemara or something like that. And except for those who opposes the Rebbe anymore, there's nobody. This basically doesn't happen. He says nowadays Jews aren't as opposed to the Torah as they were before. There's either people that are ignoramuses, they don't know what the Torah is, right? Or there's a couple people that are just have personality problems. And especially by means of the Kol Korah that the previous Rebbe said, he said, if Jews do tshuva, immediately there will be the redemption. And he said, all we have to do is just shine up the buttons. The parade is all ready for Mashiach. All we have to do is just shine up the buttons. And even more, he said, no, we already shined up the buttons also. We can receive the Mashiach immediately. Therefore, all we have to do is add a little bit more enthusiasm and joy in the service of preparing yourself and being prepared to receive the future redemption. And especially by means of adding on more commandments and doing more Torah. It says that the commandments are a lamp and the Torah is the light. And in a way that it'll shine up the whole entire surrounding. You'll find that things go much easier now than ever. Immediately, we'll all go to the land of Israel, to Jerusalem, the holy city, to the holy mountain, to the Beit HaMikdash, the holy house, the third temple, to the Holy of Holies, Binarenu, Biskeninu, our children, our elders, our sons and our daughters, all of them will come and meet Mashiach together with Mashiach. Now, all of the Jews in the world will come to the Holy Land and make the whole entire world a holy place, a happy place. No more wars, no more depression, no more aggression, no more addictions, no more confusion in the whole world, no more poverty. The whole world will be a wonderful, beautiful place, but it has to be done according to the Torah. And all these people that now are promising that this is the way it's going to be, but it can be done without the Torah, it only brings destruction and confusion. Now is the generation of Mashiach, and by means of the Torah and us learning the Torah, and following the directions of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, it's going to happen right now. Have a good Shabbos with Mashiach now. Oh, let's do the Yom Yom. We got to do the Yom Yom. All right. The early sages were like angels, and they've already determined that the healing of the soul is like the healing of the body. The first step, you want to get healed. A person's sick, you have to know what the disease is. Spiritual, also disease. Maybe it's caused that a person is just very egotistical, or maybe he is something wrong with his soul, his body. That's where physical diseases come often from a person's attitude. It could be maybe a person has bad habits, maybe he's arrogant, maybe he likes to lie, maybe he has a bad background, maybe his parents gave him bad qualities, maybe acquired things from bad friends. Unless you know what the sickness is and the causes of the disease, it's impossible to cure. Only when a person knows what the disease is, and then he knows what to avoid, and that can free him to do good. Now we can do good in the commandments and learning Torah and etc. and turning from bad. Of course, you have to do them both simultaneously, but there has to be, it's not enough just to do good. You have to also get rid of the bad things. A person can learn Torah and still be a disgusting, terrible person. Most urgent of all is that a person has to make aware, a sick person has to know two things. Number one, to know you're sick and the desire to be cured. Don't think that, I'm okay, I have problems, little problems with anger, with depression, with a few, addictions and things like that. That is no big deal. It's not so. It is a big deal. You have to know that you're sick, and this affects the whole way of your life. And how long do we have to live? People have to live. We're going to live for 100 years, 120 years, and that's it. You're finished. Why waste the time that you're here with all of your ego trips and things? Number one, so know that you're sick and get rid of it. Number two, know that you can be cured. There's a cure. Don't say, okay, I'm sick, that's who I am. With hope and absolute trust that with God's help, I will be cured of my sickness. That's the whole idea of the Mashiach coming to bring health and happiness to the entire world. Have a good Shabbat, a good day, and a good Shabbat with Mashiach now. God willing, I hope that today there will not be a class at 3 o'clock. There will not be a class at 3 o'clock, but there will be a class tomorrow morning, God willing, at 8:15. Have a good day with Mashiach now.